we've got another delivery. You know, I wonder. A little bit of a size difference, huh? This is the last one we looked at. You could almost fit two of these in one of these. That's a whole lot smaller. Well, good evening, everybody. So tonight we've got another golf cart battery to take a look at. This one is from Bopga. So this is a 48 volt, 105 amp hour golf cart battery. Comes in at 92.5 pounds. Eve Automotive cells with 150 amp BMS. This is lithium iron phosphate chemistry with 4,000 plus cycle life, down to an 80% depth of discharge, with built-in overcharge protection over discharge protection, short circuit protection, high and low temperature protection as well, a 5-year warranty, and they even have local stock in US warehouses. So right off the bat, Bopga did send this to me for my review. The very first thing that jumped out at me was its size. It looked significantly smaller than the Vatra battery that I installed several months back. And so that right there made me want to take a look at this battery. Because if I had another club car precedent and I had two of these batteries, I could actually put two of them into the golf cart and get 210 amp hours, giving me 10.6 kilowatt hours of battery capacity. So I really want to see how did they put 5.3 kilowatt hours of storage in such a small container. And so, since we're talking about specs, if we go width of the case, we're looking at 11.25. If we include the lid, we are about 12 3/8 inches wide. Depth is about 13 inches. And height, including the collapsible handles, oof, that was loud. We're at about 11 inches high. And even with the wings at the bottom, we are about 12 3/4 inches. So if you figure around 13 inches, you should be fine. And really, it's about 13 inches square all the way around. So if you look at the front, we've got the Bopga name. There's really not much on this side. If we look at the business side of the battery, we've got our negative and positive terminals, our display port, we've got a vent, and then an on-off button. Looks like 3D printed covers over your terminals, and it looks like maybe M8 bolts. On the top here, we can see lithium iron phosphate, 51.2 volts, 105 amp hours, 5.3 kilowatt hours of capacity. This does have built-in Bluetooth. They do have QR codes for their app to download for both Apple and Android. So this does come as a kit. So we've got our battery display, a mounting bracket for the display. We've got a lithium iron phosphate charger for the battery. We've got miscellaneous nuts and bolts for the battery terminals, varying lengths. It does come with a lead acid removal strap to help you easily be able to remove all those old lead acid batteries. Communication cable for the display, and a pair of 4-gauge, 200 degrees Celsius silicone cables. This does come with a one-page user manual, which, as you can see, I kind of got a little overzealous when I was pulling it out of the box and ended up ripping it right down the side. But it's got its overview, what the package includes, how to connect everything, your QR codes again, a few warnings, and then how to contact support. This lithium charger is a 48 volt, 20 amp charger. It's got indicators on the side which tell you under 80% charging and over 80%, and then green is fully charged. And that indicator is right here on the battery cable side of the charger. So let's go ahead and open this thing up and see if we can find out how did they cram 5.3 kilowatt hours of capacity into this 13 by 13 square box. Pop the top off. You can see under the cover we've got everything all sealed up from any water penetration. Oof. Wow, you open this thing up and you just get that adhesive smell. Nice waterproof gasket all the way around the outside. We can see we do have a JBD 150 amp BMS. Bluetooth module over here. We've got a epoxy board isolating the BMS from the top of the cells. From the BMS standpoint, everything is nice and tight. We have nice wire wraps on everything, monitoring everything. Now the power switch on the side does only disable discharging. The BMS is still alive. It doesn't shut the BMS off at all. So everything is nice and cable managed. We have a pair of 6 gauge 200 degrees Celsius silicone wires going to the BMS and then coming over to our battery negative. On our positive line does have heat shrink covering up the gauge, but if I compare it, it looks like it's 4 gauge wire as well, coming from the positive of the battery to the positive terminal. You can see right here we've got our temperature sensors right here coming down onto the side, and there is what looks to be 2 different temperature sensors. One right next to the Bluetooth module. Looks like it's sitting on top of the corner of the cell. Oh, and then the other one is right there, if you can see it. I mean, ideal placement would be like down into the cells or on some of the bus bars, because I think those are going to be what's going to heat up faster. And I'm guessing there's probably a temperature sensor built into the BMS as well. So we'll have to go through, remove all of our different connections, and then looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 to pop all this out. It's a 24S BMS, 150 amps. So nice wire management. Everything's in this trough. All the vents are still exposed. We have bus bars with an expansion bend in them already. Laser welded on all connections. Balance leads are underneath the silicone. Now the question is, are they just sitting there or are they soldered on? So they are soldered on underneath the silicone, which is good. 336 watt hours. So there's the QR code. Let me grab a snapshot of that and let's see what it shows up on the scanner. So we can see that it's EVE cells, lithium iron phosphate, 105 amp hours, production date of August 22nd, 2024. So great, great quality cells. We'll paste in another one. Again, August 23rd, 2024. You can see down here on the sides they've got insulation board around the outside edge isolating the cells from the case. So all in all, not too bad. The only thing that I would like to see is the temperature sensors maybe spaced one on this row and then one on this row, and even have them on a bus bar so we can get that temperature sense off of the terminals that are going to heat up faster. But it's interesting, I haven't seen these skinny cells before, and they're packed in nice and tight. They're not going anywhere. I did get everything hooked back up, and before I go through and completely close it, I wanted to check and see if this has low temperature disconnect and high temperature disconnect when charging. So we'll take our communication cable, we'll find the little notch on the end, and we'll line it up with the notch right down here so that we know it seats properly. And then we'll take our display and plug in the communication cable into the back of the display. Press the power button. You can see the blue ring around the outside of the button, signifying that the BMS discharge is turned on. We can peel this off and press the button on the display. You can see we're at 62% state of charge. Go to page 2. Discharge and charge is turned on. 65 amp hours, 1 cycle. Status is normal. And then looking at our cell voltages, everything looks to be within 1 or 2 millivolts, which is pretty nice, but that's the middle of the pack. We'll have to see how that goes during the charge and the discharge test. We've got our battery cables connected to the charger. We've got our display hooked up. We'll do our high temp disconnect real fast. Obviously, this isn't really something that affects me too much where I live, but for some of you, it might. So we'll plug the charger in. I don't know if you can see it over here, but the red light is blinking, signifying that it is charging, but under 80%. We can see on the display we are currently charging with 16.95 amps. And it stopped. I didn't see exactly what it was, but we had a little snooze icon here. It was at least 60 degrees Celsius, I know that much. Current stopped, so it's got to come down to its clear setting before it can restart charging again. Well, it still hasn't reset. So if we kill power to it and then plug it back in, and now we're charging again, 16.97 amps. Does the low charging disconnect work on this? So I did get a can of spray. We'll hold it upside down and spray the temperature sensor and see if it turns it off. And it did stop charging. I don't know if you saw the fan stopped moving. The battery is actually low enough that the display turned itself off. And we can see we've got the little snooze there. Discharge is turned off and charging is turned off. Status was cut. And we were at a negative 27 degrees Celsius. So we will, yeah, we've got some frost on this thing. So we'll clear that frost off. Warm it back up a little bit. And the fan just started on the charger, and we're ramping up to 17.88 amps again. And one thing that I've noticed is the charger over here is supposed to be a 20 amp charger, but I don't know that I've ever seen it get above 17 amps. And right now it says 16.59. This says 16.67. So the display is pretty close. But at 66%, I would kind of expect it to actually hit 20 amps in charging. But yeah, branded Bopga for lithium. I mean, this thing is solid. I just wish that I would get the full 20 amps out of it. This actually gives me a good time to be able to look at their Bluetooth app. We'll see what's going on while this battery is charging. So on the cover of the battery, as well as the printed manual, there's QR codes that direct you straight to the app for their battery. And you can see I've downloaded it already, the Bopga Green Energy app. Because this is a JBD BMS, it's going to be able to see a lot of different devices. You're just going to be able to want to match the one to the serial number of the battery that you have. And so whichever one is highlighted green, that means that it is connected to it. So we'll go over to the dashboard and we can see there's a capacity gauge on top. We can see our voltage, current, power, 16.6 amps going into the battery, 899 watts. We're at 72.3 amp hours so far. We've only had a single cycle. This time in the bottom right-hand corner, I believe it's going to be our time to fill or time to discharge. So since we're charging, we have just under 2 hours remaining. These bottom two status options are switches to turn on and off charging and discharging. Come over to the cell page. We can see our maximum, minimum, and differential, as well as our cell average, and then we can get a great picture of each individual cell. A lot of information. I mean, they've done a really good job on this app. You probably saw on the other page, there's two little floating globes on the dashboard. They're here on the right-hand side. On the cell page, they're on the bottom left. So the top one is going to be kind of like a support request, and then the bottom one is going to be a battery diagnosis to try to give you an idea if there's a problem with your battery, what's going on. Under the About page, we can see the individual settings. You won't be able to make changes to them, but you can see what the voltage settings are. I'm not going to go through all these, but a lot of these look fine to me. Current settings. The discharge over current protection is set to 320 amps. Well, we saw that this is a 150 amp BMS. So why is this set to 320 amps? It shouldn't be allowed to go that high, because from what I'm seeing, this would allow the battery to try to discharge over 3 times the cell rating, and I don't see a time limit on, how long does it have to run before that triggers. So it's just, if you discharge over 320 amps, then it's going to trigger that over current protection, because it's not designed for 320 amps. Temperature settings, charging over temperature, so it was 60 degrees Celsius as we saw in the test. Under temperature is a -2C. Advanced settings, we can see a 16 cell, data production June 3rd. So I don't know what these function settings are. I know charge balance is an option that only allows balancing to happen while your pack is charging, and you really don't want that, because as soon as you hit an over cell voltage, you stop balancing your pack. And it looks like, I'm guessing 3 temperature sensors. We know we've got 2. There's probably one in the BMS2. So 3 temperature sensors. Now this page was kind of neat, the history. I haven't seen something like this in other BMS apps. So while your app is connected, it'll read your voltage, your current, your state of charge, your capacity, and your temperature. So 2:10 and 11:38 must have been the other time that I had this app open. So it seems to remember the data that it records while this app is open. And it looks like it pulls every 2 minutes, which is kind of neat. And then we've got battery events. So what's the status of the battery every 2 minutes? So it just pulled at 7:38, it says everything is fine. 7:36, everything is fine. So because I didn't have the app open when I did my over temperature protection, it didn't show up in the app. All right, so I've got everything charged up, and now I have it connected for my test bank to do a discharge test. We'll use the charge verter and dump the power into my main battery bank. If we look at the Bopga battery app, we see 100% state of charge, 54.6 volts, 44 millivolt differential. Not too bad at all. We jump over to the smart shunt, which will be doing our calculations. We can see that we're at 100%. We're going to come down, reset the history, and we should be good to go from that standpoint. So we'll turn the battery on. We want to do around a 21 amp discharge. That'll allow us to do a 0.2 C out of the battery. So 21.32 amps, not too bad. So we're going to let this discharge test run. We're going to see if we can get the full 105 amp hour draw out of this, or even better. All right, so our discharge test is all done. The battery has disconnected. The BMS is still active. So it hit its low voltage disconnect, but you can still actually jump in and see we're at 47.6 volts. We can look at the cells, and we've got a 46 millivolt differential, which is really not bad at all. We're down to 2 cycles. Discharging has been turned off. So we'll turn on our little power supply so that we can get power back to our shunt. Open up our test wall smart shunt. Look at the history, and we had a successful 105 amp hour discharge. So we hit the actual rating of this battery. I'm sure that since the BMS still has power, we could probably eke out some more if we wanted to try and get another amp hour or even 2 out of it. But we have successfully hit that 105 amp hour rating. So I wanted to run one more test since I don't really have a golf cart that I can take this battery and drop it in. So I was trying to figure out, well, how can I actually put this thing to the test? And I thought, well, why not try and do a high current continuous discharge? So I'm going to wire things up exactly like I did for the regular discharge test. We'll use the charge verter, but instead of setting it to 20 amps for the discharge, I'm going to set the charge verter to the full 100 amps. So we'll try and do a 100 amp continuous discharge off of this Bopga battery and see how it performs. I can't imagine that somebody would end up pulling a continuous 100 amps for an hour when you're driving a golf cart, but hey, you never know. So we've got the charge inverter set to 100 amps right now, and our battery's at 100% state of charge right now. The inverters are pulling a little bit of current off of the battery. So we'll go ahead and flip the breaker. So I jumped into the Bopga app. We can see 98%. Our current coming out of the battery is currently 121 amps. So that's even higher than I was thinking. So that should be a pretty good test. 150 amp BMS, 105 amp hour cells. It's currently just before 1 o'clock. So we'll be back in just under an hour, and hopefully everything goes smoothly. So we're down to 12% state of charge. Battery says about 6 minutes left. We're actually at 122 amps right now. Still pulling just over 6 kilowatts out of the battery. Voltage is 49.7 volts. Things are still running great. If we look over at the cells, we're only at a 15 millivolt differential for over a 1C discharge, which is awesome to see. So our highest temperature is 53.9 C. And when I, put my hand on the battery, on the lugs, you can tell it's warmer, but they're not hot at all. Battery just feels, it still almost feels room temperature, but obviously it's a little warmer. But this is pretty sweet. This is handling this discharge test no problems at all. Voltage is 44.7, and we could just watch it dropping. Current's going up 138. And everything just shut down. That's almost right on time too. At 152, everything shut down. So that was a fun test. Again, if it can do a discharge like this, it should have no problems handling the surges needed for going up those hills in a cart. Okay, so final thoughts on the Bopga 48 volt 105 amp hour server rack battery. Honestly, I wish that I had a golf cart that I could actually put this thing in and put it to its full test. Make sure that You know, it's able to handle surges when you press on that uh, gas pedal to go forward, and see, is it really small enough that you could put two of these in side by side to get double the capacity in a golf cart? I could really see this being one of those batteries where, because it's so small, people could put it in their cart even if they already have another lithium battery in there. From a lot of the different conversion kits that I've already seen, the batteries are so big that you could really only get one in there. Now, granted, do you really need 100 miles of, travel ability on a golf cart? Probably not. But for something this small, why not? I am keeping my eyes open to be able to pick up some kind of a golf cart that needs a conversion, or even an electric UTV that I can use to test these golf cart style batteries in. I could see two of these getting put on a golf cart, take off the canopy roof and put a solar panel on top, and park it outside to where you let the sun recharge both batteries, so you've always got power available. You've always got the ability to drive long distances if needed. So like everything, there's going to be some pros or some cons, some things that really work well, some things that could use some adjustments. So if we look at a lot of the pros, I mean, really, you could start going through the entire feature list. You've got, EVE cells, you've got a small footprint, you've got high and low temperature protection. They did a good job with the build quality. I do really like these metal cases as opposed to the plastic style ones. I just think that they're more robust. The cell rating is a 4,000 discharge cycle rating. So you can discharge from 100% down to 0% every day for, I think that breaks down to like 10 years. And then you're still only going to be at 80% capacity of the battery. It does come with a 5-year warranty. I like that it's a full package. So you get the battery, you get the charger, you get the display, you get even some extra battery cables, and they give you different bolts depending on how many different lugs you're connecting to the terminals of the batteries. And even the little protective caps that go over the terminals, that's just a nice touch, just to make sure that while it's in your cart, nothing falls and bumps and connects the positive and negative together. We did meet our full 105 amp hour discharge. We probably could have eked out a little bit more had we tried, but we did meet its full rating. Some cons or some areas that could be worked on. I think they need to set up support email using like a website domain as opposed to Outlook or Gmail. It just looks more professional. I think they do need to adjust that overcurrent protection. 300, was it 320 or 350 amps? That's really high for 150 amp BMS. So all in all, I think it is a nice battery. I think the footprint is going to be one of those things that is really going to get people interested in because of how small it actually is. So if you've got questions, comments, please leave them all down below. And with that, I'm going to let y'all go. Y'all stay safe, stay warm, and we'll catch up with you later.